Hi, everyone. I am Nancy Burrows. I am project coordinator in Global Citizenship Education at ECOC, which is the Quebec Association in Global Citizenship Education. So without further ado, I will introduce the two contact people that we have with us tonight. So welcome to Yoland Bouchard, who has a 34-year career in teaching history of Canada and contemporary world in Mont Notre Dame College of Sherbrooke in Quebec. He has also received the General Governor's Award of Excellence for teaching in 2015. The second person we have is Dominique Forget. She is a facilitator in Global Citizenship Program in Sherbrooke with the International Center for Immigration Solidarity. And she is focusing primarily on raising awareness amongst teens. So I'd like to pass it over to her, Dominique, for her to give us a bit more information about the CSI. Hi everyone, and hi to Yola, who's in the office right next to me right now. I am working with the International Center for Immigration. It's a small global citizenship organization based in Sherbrooke. We have three main pillars. First, public engagement. So that's what we'll talk about mainly tonight. So I am here to talk about our favorite workshop named Globopoly. But for now, I'd like to hear from Yoland. As an experienced trainer, do you see play as an important tool for teaching? Dominique, it's so essential. Game and play can help your students learn without even realizing. And that's when we learn the most efficiently. That's when, you connect the dots and think critically. And so I realized that quickly and use the game as much as possible. But be careful, we don't want to fall into a trap because the game, it needs to be relevant and adapted to your public. So I want to start by taking maybe 10 minutes to tell you about Globopoly because we're going to go back and use this game to highlight different ingredients that we use all along the workshop. So Globopoly is a game that was created from A to Z by our team here at CSC. And the main goal was to put up a workshop that we gave in several schools. And the goal of the workshop was to give an introduction to international inequalities. And so we split our class up in 6 teams, each representing a character in 6 different countries of the world. So we have Canada, Japan, Syria, and 3 other countries with whom we have partnerships, Haiti, Mali, and Peru. And the goal of the game, and I'm going to show you in a minute visually what it looks like, but the game is spread across a 7-sided figure and we need to go to the center. And so it's really helpful. All the students can just look at the map and realize that their goal is to go to the middle. Actually, we use the knowledge that's already accessible in the classroom to highlight what are factors of inequalities in the world directly with the teachers. And then we do a privilege march. We give examples and statistics, and we see members of the classroom placing themselves differently in the game. So we're using their existing feelings and experiences to see, yes, that there are injustices in the world. And then depending on where the students are starting from in the game, they have access to different actions that will have impacts elsewhere towards other characters. And it's interesting because students aren't necessarily aware of what impacts will survene during one game. And so at the end of the first round, Japan normally gets to the center alone and first. And at that point, they have to draw a card and it says, okay, you're alone at the center, but you won't be able to win alone. So everybody has to step back twice, 2 steps. And it's going to happen every time somebody reaches the center alone. And that's when we bring the new rule of the game, which is rather than get to the center on your own, the goal is to reduce inequalities between the different characters. And at the end, we always take a moment to go and debrief with the students. And usually what comes out of that is I wasn't aware that what we're doing here would have such an impact elsewhere. And when we come to that realization, we put a checkpoint and we consider that we reached our goal in that class today.
And so then why does Globopoly or Globopoly work? So we have five key ingredients that we think could be interesting for everyone here. So when you want to develop your own games in your pedagogical approaches, you maybe it's not always clear what are the five ingredients that you use the first time, but these are different ways and different ingredients to include so your game can go further. And each ingredient will, you can ask you a question. So we can have a chance to actually have an exchange and reflect together tonight. So, according to you, in your opinion, do you think that it's really anchored in the needs of the environment? So, we have two things. We have to make sure it's pertinent, that is actually, it answers needs, it that are needed in the education system. And also, it has to be desirable to teachers. So now I want to ask about, if you're doing this workshop with students, how do you make sure it's rooted in your pedagogical practices? Okay, thank you, Dominique. So, what I want to go back to, Dominique, you first year that you shared this game with the students, I don't know if you remember, but I had an idea. We were able to watch the reactions of the students, and we had to have a team discussion to be like, who could be reached by this game? Because we have students that are 13 years old and others who are 17. And we wound up concluding that it was worked better and is more adaptable to the older students, because there was an idea that we could change some mentalities. But there was professors around this table, it's like, no, 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 it's pertinent to us. Actually, on the first levels, it's like a bunch of different teachers thought, it's like, for me in my English program, I'd like to do this. That's true. We thought about it for high school students, but we have facilitated in all different years. In at ACOC with Nancy, we did it with their employee team and different members. We've done it women, mothers. So it's really adaptable with this game. So I don't want to really hit this over the head too much. I know already that as teachers, you're already rooted in the needs of your community or the needs of your school. So then we'll move to the next ingredient. So, which is to have a good dose or amount of reality. So it's be rooted in reality. Their profile of the character. So we're talking about socioeconomic character is an actual true person. And we do tell this to the students, and it's like, oh, it's true what we're doing here. This is a real person. And then the students get more invested and are more like concerned about what's going to happen in this game. And then we also talk about the privileged walk. Like, so let's say if you have access to healthcare, you're allowed to move 2 squares forward. And then very quickly, people's or students' emotions are hit right by this. So at the end, everyone gets to see how it's clear there's injustice and it's unfair. But as you see certain characters that are women that have to go back and other characters go forward, it's all these little elements these students are get to see this, what it happens in the world for real. There's some things that I'll have access to and some things that I won't. And this really brings the game rooted into reality. So I also wanted to ask you the question, talking about storytelling and to bring testimonials from people from your community. Does storytelling and testimonials, are they part of your pedagogical practices, and do you think they have a stronger impact? So just to tell you, it had an impact right away during the game. Right away they made it more important, or they gave it importance, knowing with the names, the characters, the questions, everything's coming from reality. And so the whole process that was thought out and your active participation and presence in this game, the impact was huge. But just to let people who are more involved in a certain issue to speak in front of the youth and to engage them in a dialogue, it just really brings the reality forward and so many different horizons. So, Dominique, I'd just like to add we have way more networks around us than we believe. There's a parents, there's a community, and and it should be an obligation over the school year. It should also be like, what is the pedagogical support? Let's bring in people from our community into the schools. If the school has to open up for everyone who lives around it. So we're just talking about the playful aspect, offering a fun environment. This is the third ingredient. So what are the elements of a game that makes it interesting and fun? So that was the first part of the question that we had at the end. We want to get out of just a theory. We want to break it up bigger than just a workshop, and we want to make it as fun as possible. And for students to get pique their interest, it has to be motivating. And the students have to be in a certain level of control of what's happening to keep their interest. And the game really gives us the opportunity to do both, because interest is easy because it's like we're getting out of the typical schoolroom and the materials is fun. But then the control level is to be able, they get to make decisions. They get to reflect with their peers about what are the better choices that can be made to move the game forward. And Yolande, I wanted to ask you, let's say there's so many issues that are brought up in this game, Globopoly. So then how does the game bring up these issues of in a different way when we're in the class with the game rather than typical ways? So game opens the door to, doesn't matter what theme, any subject. And it helps us drop the stereotypes and the taboos. And with the Globopoly game, we're in the fun times, the play times, but the themes are still serious because the solutions that we can offer are actual solutions. One element that I really learned or was became aware with because of this game, realizing that our public or our clientele is more and more international. In my classroom, I saw the difference over the 34 years, the origin or where my students were from, how it changed. Cultures are transforming. So it was able to drop walls to this game allowed certain themes to be brought up, and then certain students will able to say, yes, I can confirm this. I can now talk about where I'm from and my experience. And these were often moments that hit hard, that touched me a lot, to see students who were able to take time and give their little testimonial of their life, and to be able to bring their own lives and heart into this game. It's very touching. And so if that can just plant some seeds to give youth a chance to feel better, to share their stories, to talk about their history, it helps make prejudices go away, right? And create dialogues.
So let's go to the next ingredient, which is uh, putting the accent on collaboration and co-construction. Collaboration seemed to be an essential component when we created this game because it needs actionable skills that have to be developed to become an involved citizen in our own community or in the world. So it's all about dialogue, debate, compromise, co-constructing, how to think of others and not just ourselves. And so the fact that the game needs these skills to be put into action, it allows us to bring the students smoothly into this critical environment. As a facilitator, we are also able to give different roles in the team. For example, some team members may be responsible for keeping some kind of information, tracking other statistics. And so we are trying to distribute strengths and weaknesses um, fairly amongst teams so that every student has a chance to be useful. So Yoland, collaboration and handling the content. There's also the fact that teams have to collaborate together in amongst each other. And so for you, how did it help you approach issues around solidarity and global citizenship education? But what would usually surprise me is even those who were the least attracted by these kinds of themes would still get on board because it was a participating game. There's the team itself that has to speak up, but in between the teams, we were also trying to find collective solutions to our issues. So funny enough, I feel that if it had been a game where each of the students had a little chore to do individually, we wouldn't have had that much success. Earlier, when I was explaining the game a little bit, it is a collaborative game, so everybody wins, everybody loses. It's sort of like a collaborative board game. It's the same approach, the same dynamic. But every time you would go to class at the end of the game, you would say we have reached a level of sharing that was almost fair, and everybody would clap that in their collaboration they were successful. And that's what youth is all about too. You give it tools to act, and then they would forget that for an hour and a half they were changing the world. You're giving them tools to change the world completely, and that really made them proud. They were proud of themselves, and it could show because when they would go back to class, some students would talk and they had maybe never spoken to each other before, but because they had to collaborate and find solutions to planetary issues, they would keep talking about the game and then maybe get closer. Yes, so this kind of activity is very useful in so many ways. It really brings us to the fifth ingredient that I wanted to tell you about tonight, which are concrete solution ideas, bringing teenagers to talk about things that they don't necessarily understand well. It can be very quickly anxiety inducing. We can talk about all the climate issues right now that are generating a lot of stress for many youths across Quebec and Canada in general. And so it was very important for us to not leave the youth in this feeling of anxiety and anguish about things that really are much greater than them. And so we wanted to give them ideas of solutions. So concrete steps that they can take from now directly to be a positive actor of change in their community, whether on a small to a larger scale. We can talk about personal acts or action that can really bring um, concrete change in their personal outlook on the world, but there are also very tangible things that they can do, like for example buying fair trade bananas when you go to the groceries with your parents. And so we try to take every single aspect and suggest one concrete action that we can do as a youth in Quebec and Canada in 2022, that you can do that will bring good around you, that you can talk about to people around you, so that other people may take the same path as you do towards change. And I think that's the best strength of the game. But generally speaking, I think when we go into a complex issue, it's very important to give a power of action to the youth through that, so that they can root in their realities, they can root it in their realities, and then get engaged in their realities in their school environment, in their community, etc. So these prejudice that you us as white or richer countries were successful because we were just more responsible or capable of facing obstacles more efficiently. But when we think about it, it's not the case. Yes, and through time our game also evolved. I think in global citizenship education and organizations, we are uh, becoming more and more aware about anti-colonial struggles. And I think in the first years that I was using this issue in our game, I think it was a bit more murky. It was a bit harder to approach. And now we see that we have easier definitions, and the awareness is being slowly uh, more shared and more understood. And unfortunately we have so many situations happening right now in Haiti, and we can use those to make sure that our students understand that there are so many colonial dynamics going on in this, and it's not a question of individual or even collective capacity to act. And so it's a matter of giving understanding tools so that we can understand in a positive light what really is going on, um, and to think critically about the world around them. I would like to hear whether anybody has any questions. I also wanted to see if anybody has similar experiences. We're talking about, a complex game that has a lot of, different aspects to it. I have a question about one of the things I thought was interesting in this game is the question of privileges. So, are there any identification going on? Do students identify themselves to the characters, or um, yes, oftentimes when we talk about the countries and we let the students choose their countries, some of them will go right away towards a country that they're interested in. There's something interesting because Japan isn't a country where Canadian students have a tendency to interact with. And so we tell the students, okay, you have to really think as Mr. Namaki from Japan, and you have to think like he would. And there are some teams that are very comfortable with that, and they can take it on right away, and they go into this ruthless businessman character. But other people are so uncomfortable, and they repeatedly apologize. And but so where some students will take the role very easily and defend it easily, then it'll intimidate others in different ways. And so we also try not to fall into the trap of stereotypes. Um, so we always have to, explain. So Ariette from Haiti in the game, isn't actually supposed to represent the medium Haiti person. And so it is still essential because there is a bit of appropriation. Students will appropriate their characters, and it'll help them project themselves into the game. Marie-Catherine was asking in the chat box, I'm not sure if she was wondering whether there were rules given out at the beginning of the game to create a safer space, especially considering that the nature of this game. Well, with Globopoly, we didn't really feel the need to go into that. Um, that being said, when we go into groups with whom we don't have many contact, we try to still take a moment to see what's the group's general vibe, was there a general approach towards this kind of issues. And sometimes we would take, if we are working with a class where there's a lot of reactivity, or maybe students are less familiar with the content, then we would warn ahead of time and try to make sure that they were prepared before the game. And so, for example, when you're in a very multicultural group, we don't trigger warn the class, but we do prepare the facilitators to better react if there are inappropriate comments that come out, or if there are maybe more personal triggering subjects that come up. Yes, it's true that when we do activities like this, we can't just be like, okay, bye, Dominic, it's done, and everybody can just leave the class and we don't talk about it again. We have to debrief. And so the following period is just as important, maybe more than the activity itself. That's the moment where we really grasp the meaning of the activities. What have we learned during the game, through playing, but also what caught your attention? What really grabbed you when you able to see inequalities, how they are born, how they are being fueled? What what was your reaction? How did you react to this information? Okay, so if I understand Yoland, so we're talking about Globopoly, but it could be any other game. So what the ingredient we're talking about now is how can we find tools to teach about important subjects such as social inequalities. And what I understand from what you're saying is the main idea was to have CSC come into the classroom, have a game of Globopoly, and when you see the same group the next time around, then you choose to have like a half hour or maybe, no, I take the whole class to debrief. I was using Globopoly as a triggering point because the next following class, well, we had lived something together and now let's share about it. And then we would go back to see what solutions we could identify together. There is a goal in this game of Globopoly is to identify what solutions we already do have in our hands. But if you want an ideal society, if you want heaven on earth, then change your own attitudes. Open up, open your heart and your mind, your souls. You have around you the whole world in in the palm of your hand.
Faire du pouce là-dessus? Dans le fond, c'est dans les
Can I
ingrédients que
continue on that? The ingredients that you named and that you're talking about playfulness, fun, collaboration, and all these actual solutions. Of course, we're not talking about totally absurd things. It's like these, but how are these things don't happen necessarily in the schoolyard. And but these things can bring us towards feeling a lack of power or like paralyzed, right? Because it's too big for me. I can't touch this. So that's what's so important in our educational activities is to not leave people with this feeling of disempowerment or no power. If you invite the CSC to come into your class, there's a before, during, and after point, and that before, during, and after has to take up thought, and it's important. And we're talking about ingredients, and it makes me think about our recipe, and it's kind of when you paint too. So let's say when you make your recipe, you have to plan beforehand, and you also have to do the dishes afterwards. And yeah, I like that image that you shared, Nancy. And so what the CSC shared in my class was a yeast for the bread. That's what I saw. So I had ingredients, right? I knew themes, but it wouldn't have raised as much. So because I needed a good yeast, and this this yeast came from the community sector. It came from our community organizations who brought us back to get focused, to remind us what are our big values. And I think those are very nice words that you said to speak about this yeast, this thing, to create it, to make it grow bigger. And I saw a message that I said, and just a message to everyone says like, I want Globopoly to be accessible to everyone. And so I hear that. I know it's not available right now, but I feel the pressure. I think I want to figure out solutions. And okay, so that's always an issue when we talk about Globopoly. It's like, what's the possibility of exporting this? And we are not in a really capitalist mentality, so we have a little bit of a difficulty in our our exporting of this. So, but maybe after COVID, we'll be able to figure out like we're looking about how doing it online, going into classes and talking about it with students and teachers. But so maybe there's another organization, or we could take a project that's more neutral than CSI or CSC. And so to figure out a way that teachers could facilitate it in their networks. And it was 2-year project to create this game. So it's hard to just change, but I hear your messages from teachers, and we'd like to make it more available at a larger scale eventually. So I don't want to cut our conversation short here. But I just wanted, since you were talking about the other things, I wanted to give you a chance to promote it. And is there any other things people can access or buy that you wanted to share at the moment? What I feel the general idea to share tonight is like, yes, we have this game Globopoly and we made this, but it's just to share these ingredients with you to inspire that certain themes, certain problematic issues that you might have a chance of. There's different creative ways to address them, and then try to invent games maybe with your students or with other people that can be inspired from this ingredient list. It's not scientific, it's just putting into practice and trying these out that we were able to figure this out. And so that's that this is how these came up. And we have other examples of other workshops that are easier to organize and to facilitate, but they all use these same 5 ingredients. So just wanted to say how games and playing can really help with global citizenship education and have strong results. I just wanted to say thank you so much for everyone's participation. Thank you for coming, Dominique and Yoland. It was so inspiring and so interesting, and it helped to see how we can do creative, fun activities that can help make accessible complex issues and can help students reflect and move towards action.
de votre
So
participation
thank
ce
you
soir.
so much for your participation this evening.